Mira tapped her pen against her desk, the soft hum of the office fading into the background as her thoughts drifted. Tomorrow, she'd meet the man her parents had chosen. Arranged, such a clinical word for something so deeply personal, she thought. The arrangement of two lives, like pieces on a board, meant to complement each other. Except, Mira wasn't sure what she was supposed to gain from it. At 31, she had carved out her own space in the world. A marketing executive in a fast-paced corporate firm, she had spent years building her career, often at the cost of her personal life. Late-night meetings, presentations, travel, it was a rhythm she had come to love. Her identity was intertwined with her work. She was independent, confident, and, truth be told, relieved that she had delayed marriage long enough to reach this point. Yet, here she was, surrendering to the idea of an arranged marriage. Her parents had been patient but insistent. "It's time, Mira," they had said, as if her success was a temporary phase and the real achievement awaited her in marriage. They had found someone they believed would match her. Match. Another word that irritated her, reducing human connection to compatibility scores. The man, Arjun, was also successful, a software engineer in Bangalore. From what little she knew, he was well-mannered, came from a good family, and, as her mother had pointed out, had no problem with a working wife. But Mira knew that no problem didn't mean support. What did he really think about her late nights, her ambition, her desire to keep pushing boundaries in her career? Would her in-laws expect her to prioritize home over work once children came into the picture? These were questions that stayed beneath the surface, unasked and unanswered, as if the very act of asking would label her too difficult, too modern for a good Indian wife. She wondered, what exactly would she gain from this? Would marriage give her the emotional support she occasionally yearned for but didn't dare admit? Would it bring the balance everyone else seemed to crave, the stability her parents praised? Or would it lead to compromise, giving up parts of herself, sacrificing ambition for tradition, independence for approval? The next evening, she met Arjun in a quiet cafe. He smiled easily, but there was a formality in the air, as if they were both acutely aware of the roles they were expected to play. They exchanged pleasantries, talked about work, and briefly touched upon their families. It was polite, predictable. "So, do you see yourself staying in your job long-term?" Arjun asked, his tone casual but loaded with curiosity. Mira hesitated. This was the moment, wasn't it? The crossroads where she could either reassure him, yes, she'd figure out a balance, yes, she'd make family her priority when the time came, or she could be honest. Brutally so. "I love my job. It's a big part of who I am," she said, her voice steady. "I'm not looking to slow down anytime soon." Arjun raised an eyebrow but didn't flinch. "That's good to hear. I feel the same way about my work. I'm not sure why people assume marriage means one of us has to compromise." The words surprised her. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of something unexpected, understanding. Could this be what she stood to gain? Not a partnership built on sacrifice, but one where both could flourish, unrestrained by expectations. Still, there was the nagging fear that things could change. After all, society had a way of imposing its will, regardless of individual promises. Would their mutual respect survive the pressures of extended family, children, and tradition? As their conversation drifted into other topics, Mira's mind lingered on the question. In arranged marriages, like the one she was stepping toward, what did a woman truly gain? Maybe the answer wasn't as clear-cut as she feared. Perhaps it wasn't about gaining or losing, but about the delicate art of finding balance. A balance in which silence and understanding could coexist, where dreams didn't have to be sacrificed at the altar of tradition. Mira sat quietly in her childhood bedroom, staring at the walls that once held her dreams. Tomorrow marked her first wedding anniversary. 1 year since she'd walked into Arjun's life, balancing her professional ambition with the responsibilities of being a wife. She had followed the path her parents had set out for her, a good daughter who had finally settled down. But tonight, her phone lay on the bedside table, screen dark, hiding the messages she had discovered. Messages from Arjun, meant for someone else. A year ago, when she first met Arjun in that cafe, she had cautiously hoped for understanding. He had seemed different, even progressive. "We'll make it work," he'd said, his tone reassuring when they discussed her demanding career. Mira had taken comfort in those words, deciding to believe in this arranged marriage, a concept she had resisted for so long. Her parents had been overjoyed, telling her what every Indian parent does: marriage is about compromise, beta. You're not just marrying a man, but his family too. You'll need to adjust. Adjust. She remembered those words echoing in her mind as she moved to Bangalore, into the home Arjun shared with his parents. Her in-laws were kind but traditional. They didn't mind that she worked, but there were expectations, unspoken, yet omnipresent. The late nights at the office, the weekend meetings, those were tolerated, but never embraced. Her mother's advice had always been clear. Don't bring your work stress home. A wife's job is to create peace at home, not tension. And so, Meera had adjusted. She cooked dinners even after exhausting workdays, made sure her home looked perfect when guests visited, and smiled politely through every family gathering. Sacrifice, she reminded herself, was part of the deal. But there were moments, those quiet moments when she'd sit alone after everyone had gone to bed, when she wondered what she was sacrificing her dreams for. Then came the messages. It had been an accident, really. Arjun had left his phone unlocked, and a notification popped up, too intimate, too personal to ignore. A woman's name she didn't recognize, and a string of texts that made her stomach twist. I miss you. Can't wait for next week. Meera felt the room spin as she scrolled through weeks of conversations, plans, late-night calls, even trips he had taken, for work. Her hands shook, heart pounding as she read the words. This was the man she had adjusted for. The man her parents had vouched for, who had promised her understanding. She confronted him that night. Arjun didn't deny it. His explanation was cold, calculated. Look, Meera, he said, his voice flat. We were put together by our families. I never felt the kind of connection with you that I wanted. I'm sorry, but this is how it is. She stared at him in disbelief. This is how it is? After everything? Arjun shrugged. You're a good wife. You've done nothing wrong, but we were never a match. My parents like you keep the house running. That's all they really care about. As long as no one finds out, why should it matter? His words struck her harder than any physical blow. Why should it matter? She had built her life around making things work, sacrificing pieces of herself for the sake of this marriage, and he dismissed it as if it were a business transaction. Meera had always known the weight of societal expectations, but to see how lightly Arjun bore them shattered her. The next morning, her parents called, sensing her distress. Meera poured out the truth, expecting them to understand, to stand by her. But their response was a bitter reminder of the world she was part of. Beta, every marriage has its ups and downs, her father said. These things happen. What matters is that you don't break your home. A woman's strength is in keeping the family together. Her mother chimed in, echoing generations of conditioning. Forgive him. Men have their weaknesses, but a wife's forgiveness can change everything. Don't let this ruin what we've worked so hard to build. What they had worked so hard to build. Not what she had. Meera felt the weight of their expectations crushing her. They wanted her to accept it, to move on, to pretend it never happened. For the sake of appearances, for the sake of family. Sitting in her childhood room, Meera stared out the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. She had done everything right. She had balanced work and home, sacrificed her own happiness to fit the mold of the perfect daughter, the perfect wife. But in the end, what had she gained? Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Arjun, messaging about dinner plans with his parents for their anniversary. He didn't apologize. He didn't even acknowledge the conversation they had the night before. As if it didn't matter. Meera looked at the screen, then at the small suitcase by her bed. In a few hours, she would leave, her career, her ambition, her self-worth still intact, but everything else in pieces. What did a woman truly gain from an arranged marriage if she had to lose herself in the process? Maybe nothing. Maybe, in the end, it wasn't about what she gained at all, but about what she refused to lose.